It was supposed to be just dinner. A casual family gathering to celebrate Uncle Ray's early retirement. The kind with linen napkins folded into triangles, a present menu none of us needed, and a glass of wine you didn't have to order. It just arrived, as if the bottle already knew you'd need it. The hum of conversation had started to blur into one long, warm drone until my father's voice, deep, declarative, performative, sliced through it like a razor. He waited until the second course had been cleared, until the room had softened with alcohol and social inertia, until everyone was loose enough to laugh, but not sober enough to hold back. He said it like a punchline, like he'd been holding it in for years and just couldn't resist. She's always been bad with money. That's what he led with, and just like that, the entire table shifted, not physically, but emotionally. The conversation pivoted from Uncle Ray's golf plans to me. My father made sure of it. His finger pointed with mock formality, like I was a bullet point on a slideshow. I told her to be a teacher, he continued, grinning as he leaned back. Solid income, summers off, retirement plan. But no, Diana wanted to be a startup queen. He even held his wine glass a little higher, toasting the punchline he had become so proud of. And they laughed. Not all of them, but enough. Enough for me to feel it land. My cousins snickered, those same ones who still lived on parental stipends and called themselves consultants. My uncles chuckled, the kind of laugh men do when they're not sure if they agree, but don't want to be the odd one out. And my little brother? He looked away, smirked, a flash of something on his face. Maybe embarrassment for me, or maybe relief it wasn't his turn in the hot seat. I didn't say a word, didn't fidget, didn't protest. I simply placed my fork down, not loudly, not softly, just precisely. Because what I felt wasn't embarrassment, it wasn't shame. It was clarity, sharp and sudden, like a blade pressed against skin without breaking it. He had done this before, many times, small digs, dismissive comments, offhand jokes about my quirky little app, and how it would never pay the bills, but never like this, never so publicly, never so deliberately. It wasn't just that he didn't believe in me, it was that he needed others not to believe in me either. He needed the room to stay convinced that his way, his world of land, leases, and legacy, was the only way to win, that what I was building with code and community and new rules wasn't real. And perhaps, up until that moment, a part of me still needed his validation. Still hoped one day he'd say, "I'm proud of you," instead of, "You should have done it my way." But that hope, that fractured thing I carried quietly, it died that night. Right there between the Cabernet and the crème brûlée. Not loudly, not with tears, just the clean, internal snap of something that finally knew it didn't need to beg to be seen anymore. I didn't cry. I didn't storm out. I just swallowed my wine, smiled politely, and started planning. There's a difference between being silent and being small. I was never small, but I had learned, over time, that silence was safer. That when it came to my father, when it came to my family, succeeding too loudly could be as dangerous as failing. So I let them believe what they wanted. Let them assume that my days were spent in cafes with my laptop open and no real money coming in. Let them joke about my app thing and ask if I needed help with my rent. I didn't correct them. I didn't need to. Because behind the curtain they so casually dismissed, I was building something real. 2 years ago, I'd launched Finch, a mobile platform that taught Gen Z how to manage credit, save, invest, and negotiate. It started with a 10-slide pitch deck and a dream I'd barely dared to say out loud. Today, Finch had over 2 million active users, an advisory board that included 2 former Fortune 500 CFOs, and partnerships with 3 national banks. Last quarter, we crossed $7.5 million in revenue. We just closed Series B at a $40 million valuation. I was not broke. I was not playing CEO. I was one, but none of them knew, because I'd chosen not to tell them. Not because I was hiding. I had learned to call it self-protection. My therapist once said I carried the wounds of a child who was praised only when she was predictable. That every unconventional decision I made was met not with curiosity, but with caution. My wins weren't celebrated, they were scrutinized. My father was the master of the backhanded compliment. "Well, I don't really get it. but if it's working for you, or just don't come running to me when the bubble bursts. Every time I proved him wrong, he made me pay for it with cold distance, shifting expectations, or smug lectures about why I'd still eventually fail. He never yelled. He didn't have to. His disapproval was efficient, polished, professional, dressed in logic. He believed in real estate, in property lines and square footage and blueprints. That's what built his empire. So when I told him I was building an app, he looked at me like I'd said I was chasing stars. Apps don't pay mortgages, he told me. You need something you can touch, something you can pass down. He didn't understand that ideas, the right ideas, could move faster than brick and mortar. That value didn't have to come with a deed. But I didn't push back. Not then. I stayed quiet, too quiet, because I knew from experience, every time I won, he got smaller. Every time I succeeded outside of his framework, he took it as a loss. And a daughter is supposed to make her father proud, not threatened. But that night, when he turned my silence into his stage, something snapped. He didn't just dismiss me anymore, he diminished me publicly, with intention. And I decided, finally, that if he wanted to have a conversation in dollars and deals, I would speak in his language, not for his approval, but for the truth he had refused to see. I wasn't his failure, I wasn't his footnote, and I wasn't looking for applause. I was ready to speak, not through words, through power. Revenge isn't about rage, it's about precision. The morning after that dinner, I didn't rant or spiral or waste time imagining some dramatic confrontation. I opened my laptop, poured my coffee, and got to work. Because the way you deal with men like my father isn't by yelling, it's by outmaneuvering them. And I knew exactly where to start. James Lockwood. My father's partner of nearly 3 decades, James had always struck me as the quieter brain behind the operation. The man who actually ran the numbers while my father shook hands and sold a smile. He and my dad had built the company together, but they'd always been cut from different cloth. James was data. Dad was dominance. So I reached out. No fanfare, just a short message through a trusted contact. Dana Mitchell wants to discuss a potential strategic opportunity. Confidential, time-sensitive. He took the meeting. We sat in a corner booth at a steakhouse far enough from downtown that no one would see us. He looked older than I remembered, thinner, with a fatigue that didn't come from age alone. And the moment I mentioned a buyout, he didn't flinch. He sighed. He'd been waiting for an out. Turns out the business had been in slow decline for years. My father refused to digitize their property portfolio, still relied on printed mailers for marketing, and shot down any suggestion of bringing in outside consultants. He tightened his grip as the industry moved past him. The younger talent was frustrated. The margins were shrinking. James was ready, and I came with capital, clarity, and a plan. Due diligence took exactly 13 days. My team combed through every asset, every liability, every forgotten warehouse and vacant office lease. I formed a shell company, DeRose Holdings, LLC, nothing flashy, just clean enough to stay anonymous. The offer was generous but fair. James signed. Next came the tricky part, the remaining 40%. That meant staff shareholders, senior managers, and long-term employees who held small equity stakes. I approached each through legal intermediaries. The pitch was simple. A silent investor committed to modernization, with a vision for long-term growth. I never used my name, but I knew the whispers would start. Someone's buying out Mitchell and Lockwood. The moment word got back to Dad, I knew he'd assume it was a competitor. He'd panic, maybe even scramble to gather funds to block it. But by then, it was too late. Every agreement was binding. Every transfer had cleared. By December 20th, I held 62% of the company. And I waited. 3 months later, I walked into his office for the first time in years. The same glass desk. The same framed photo of him and James at their first property closing. Nothing had changed, except everything had. He looked up, startled. "You're here for James?" I held up the folder. Neat, tabbed, final. "No," I said. "I'm here because I'm your new boss." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. Not defensive, not angry. Just empty. The sound of a man realizing that the ground he built everything on was now under someone else's feet. Mine. The silence after I said it stretched longer than I expected. At first, I thought he might laugh. That condescending half-chuckle he always used when he wanted to dismiss an idea without dignifying it with an argument. But there was none of that. Not this time. He just stared. "You're bluffing," he said finally. Flat, measured, almost bored, like the sentence had been rehearsed, a reflex more than a thought. His eyes didn't match the tone. They moved, darting to the folder I placed on his desk. So I slid it forward. It made a soft sound against the wood, almost polite. Inside were the share certificates, a clean, color-coded breakdown of ownership, the notarized letter from James, signed and dated, the official transfer filings with the state, and at the very top, in crisp legal print, the words that couldn't be mistaken for anything else: DeRose Holdings, LLC, controlling stake, 62%. His name wasn't on a single page. Mine was. He picked up the folder with one hand, slowly, like it might be hot. Read through it, then read through it again. No outbursts, no raised voice, no accusations. Just the quiet realization of a man being forced to absorb something he couldn't rewrite. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk or twist the knife, because that wasn't the point. I hadn't done this to punish him. I'd done it to reclaim something he chipped away at for most of my life: my legitimacy. My right to exist in the world on my own terms, not the ones he decided were acceptable. "I'm not here to fire you," I said. "I want you to stay on." That got his attention. His brow lifted in disbelief. "You want me to stay?" I nodded. "You know the people. You know the properties. Your instincts in the field are sharp, even if your strategies are outdated. But we're going to do things differently now." The moment I said it, I could see something shift in his posture. It wasn't defeat. It was uncertainty. The feeling of standing in a house you built only to find someone changed the locks and rearranged the walls. He lowered the folder. "Let it rest between us." "Why would you do this?" he asked, not bitter, genuinely confused. "After everything, why not just let me fall?" It was a fair question. A part of me had asked it too. I took a breath and met his gaze steady. "Because I'm not bad with money, Dad. I just stopped asking for your permission to prove it." And there it was. Not anger, not triumph, just truth. The kind that doesn't yell. The kind that doesn't ask to be believed. The kind that simply is. He didn't respond right away. He just looked at me like he was seeing me fully for the first time. Not the girl who used to tag along to open houses or the woman who built something in silence. Just me, Dana, the one who stayed quiet long enough to learn the language of power and then used it. Not to take his place, but to make space for herself, on her terms. Growth doesn't always roar. Sometimes it moves like tidewater, steady, rising, impossible to ignore. Since I took over, the company has expanded 40%. Not because I reinvented the wheel, but because I refused to keep spinning it in the mud. I streamlined operations, brought in a younger marketing team, shifted key properties to digital-first leasing, and implemented scalable systems Dad never bothered to learn. I didn't burn the house down. I renovated it, while he stood in the corner watching, unsure if it would hold. He stayed on just like I asked. At first, he walked around like a ghost in his own office, arms folded, lips thin. He attended meetings but rarely spoke unless prompted. I let him keep his title, senior advisor, but made it clear that respect would now be earned, not inherited. There were moments where the old habits flared. An eye roll during a brainstorming session, a muttered, "This is a phase," when I brought in new software. But time is an honest editor, and performance is the sharpest pen. By the end of the first quarter, revenue had climbed. Client retention improved. Employee turnover dropped. A few old guard loyalists left. I didn't stop them. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke louder than I ever could. And my father, slowly, almost unwillingly, began to listen. His tone softened. His resistance faded. By month 6, he started arriving early again, walking the floor, greeting staff by name like he used to. But the air had shifted. People looked to me for direction. They checked with me before making big calls. And not because I demanded it, because I delivered. I never once raised my voice. I never once reminded him who owned the majority stake. I didn't have to. Last week, we had our quarterly all hands. There were over 60 people in the room and twice that many dialed in remotely. I was giving a presentation on our expansion into the Southeast market when he walked in late, carrying coffee like a civilian. He slipped into the back without interrupting, something he never used to do. Afterward, I was introducing a new hire to the leadership team when Dad approached. He extended a hand to the young analyst, then nodded toward me. "This," he said, without irony or resistance, "is the reason we're still standing." And just like that, years of tension didn't disappear, but they loosened. That moment didn't taste like revenge. It didn't have the edge or the fire I used to fantasize about. It tasted like justice. Not courtroom justice, not cinematic, but quiet, internal justice. The kind that settles deep in your bones when you realize you don't need to be seen his way to be real. This wasn't just about me. It was for every daughter told she wasn't business-minded, every woman labeled emotional for making instinctual decisions, every creative dismissed because she didn't wear ambition like a tie. I didn't have to scream. I didn't have to win a fight. I just had to build, patiently, precisely, relentlessly. And when the time was right, I didn't take his chair. I bought the table and offered him a seat. One I now owned. One I no longer needed to be invited to.